it's played more and more of an important part in how I approach sponsoring, carrying the message. It's played a more and more important role as the years have gone on. I've really really seen the wisdom in much of the material in this chapter. And the funny thing is, it went so much at odds with what my experience was in early Alcoholics Anonymous. I was inundated with the fellowship stuff. It was all fellowship, and there really wasn't a lot of attention paid to the actual taking of the 12 steps. It was more about get busy, get a service commitment, make coffee, go to do a 90 and 90, all this stuff. So when I was first exposed to this chapter, I'm like, whoa, this doesn't look like anything, that makes any sense to me. But over the course of the years, I've come to see it as a very compassionate approach to helping other alcoholics. I see it as a compassionate approach. And I'd like to just explain that a little bit. So how people approached me in 1989, 1990 was they encouraged me to go to meetings, like really stay consistent with meetings. Meeting makers make it. Hang with us, hey, there's a really good meeting tomorrow night. Why don't you, come with us to that meeting tomorrow night? And so there was a lot of people who were encouraging me to stay sober and stay attached to and close to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm extremely grateful to those people, because what they did was they held me in place long enough for me to discover that there was a program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But why I see this chapter as compassionate is the people that were supportive of me in the early days, they were supporting my sobriety. They were supporting my attendance at the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous. What this chapter talks about offering somebody recovery from alcoholism. And recovery is light years better than sobriety. And so I define sobriety as the mere abstinence from alcohol, just no alcohol in the body. That's sobriety. Recovery is not only the absence of alcohol, but it's an emotional healing. It's a spiritual healing. It's behavioral. It's relationship oriented. There's a lot of things that get much, much better in your life when you achieve recovery. So recovery is like this holistic thing that makes sobriety safe. It makes sobriety safe. It's not a tentative condition that could blow up at any period of time. So this chapter is compassionate in that it wants you to right away focus in on and get busy with offering an alcoholic the path to recovery. And I know it was written before there was a lot of meetings. I understand Alcoholics Anonymous is different today, but I still think it's very, very important to explain to an alcoholic what the problem is, and then to share with the alcoholic your experience with the recovery process. And I think that's compassionate. I think, I think allowing somebody to think sitting in a meeting is going to provide long-term recovery, I think that's not compassionate. I think that's lazy. And I know I've been that AA in the past, and maybe will be again, who knows, but the best, the good is sometimes the enemy of the best. Is it good to encourage people to go to AA? Is it good to encourage people to get consistent meeting attendance? Is it good to, encourage them to get service commitments and be the coffee maker and, become a GSR and carry a message into a tree? Yeah, all that's good. The good is sometimes the enemy of the best. Time can be spent on the attention to the 12 steps, which will bring about a recovery. And this chapter just lays that out. That's why it just felt so foreign and unorthodox to me when I was first exposed to it. And today I really take it all to heart. So in the weeks prior to this, we went over the first visit. What do we do on the first visit? Well, we share our experience with alcohol. We share our experience with what the first step is to us, what our problem is. We share our experience going through the 12 steps and what has happened to us because of that process. And then we offer to be available. Continue to be available to that person if they wish to make a decision. Now, we're going to be available to the person if they wish to make a decision. Now, what the decision is to go on, tell their story, go on with the rest of the steps. That's what the decision is, that they're talking about in the chapter Working with Others. And it's my responsibility to be available if someone is willing to do that. It's more than a responsibility. It's to me, it's my purpose in life, which is purpose is greater than responsibility. So that's what we went over. We went over the second visit. They've read this book. They're willing to go. They're willing to do what this book explains they're going to have to do to recover from alcoholism. And you can help them because you've had that experience yourself. This chapter tells us. So when we're doing this type of a 12-step call, what do we have to have done? We have to have actually done the 12 steps. There's encouraging somebody to stay sober and go to meetings, and then there's offering someone a recovery program that's going to get them to power and freedom and be safe and protected from alcohol and know a new freedom and a new happiness and all the other promises that there's an abundant amount of promises in here, and they all relate back to the steps, not sobriety, to the steps. So that being said, we're going to finish this chapter tonight. I've got a little bit of reading I'm going to have to do. But that's all good and well. I am about 2/3 of the way down, page 98. So we're still kind of talking to the alcoholic. We're still kind of engaged with the family. We're starting to develop a relationship with the person, the family that we're trying to help. And it's going to give us some advice on what to do and what not to do. What are some of the best practices, what are some of the mistakes that they made, and there's some great information in here. So it says, burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. So you make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, and you follow that decision up with a course of action that is going to do that for you. The 12 steps are a personal inner pathway to connection with the divine, and clean house. We need to make amends. We need to set things right. We need to explain very, very seriously to the new prospect that we're going to expect them to go out there and make amends. We're going to expect them to pay the money back. We're going to expect them to be knocking on a lot of doors. I don't think it's compassionate to let somebody think that there's not going to be specific spiritual exercises that are going to be necessary for their recovery. I would rather they balk and decide to go a different direction on the first or the second visit than I would to work with them for weeks or months and then find out they're not going to do amends then. You know what I mean? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this in the beginning. And I always share with them, look, if you feel like a lot of fear or a lot of anxiety about, going back and making these amends, understand that you don't have the power to do them right now. Each step, each successive step gives you the power to do the next step and removes enough fear from you to do the next step. But are you willing? Would you like to be the type of person who could, set right all the wrongs? I think it's important, to find out. And he's telling us that that's what we're supposed to tell them. They can get sober, regardless of external situations, regardless of whether she left or she stayed, regardless of whether you lost the job or you got the promotion, regardless of any of that stuff. We can get sober as long as we trust God and clean house. Now, the domestic problem. There may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. Oh, I can't imagine a brand new sober alcoholic with strained relations. Can you? that would come as such a surprise to me. That there's difficulties in personal relationships. When your prospect has made such reparation as he can to his family and has thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. So this is basically saying amends to the families comes right away, folks, right away. Like as the best amends you can possibly do with like 4 days sober or whatever, which is not going to be a really great one. But the the attitude, the demonstration has to be there that, I'm sober now. I'm working 12 steps. I've made a decision to change the way I'm living. And part of that is really making an effort to be a different kind of person. And I've done a lot of things that were, that were not good. And I want to make those things right. So when the person you're working with has made such reparation, and remember, these reparations take a lifetime. We have a family a lot of times has become extremely ill due to a consistent proximity to us. They've become emotionally and spiritually ill. So, just saying I'm sorry and then moving on is not it. We make reparations, we make a demonstration, but sometimes these amends take a lifetime. We've just got to change the way we've been relating to our family. Okay, so we're supposed to then put these new principles, we should proceed to put these principles into action at home, right away. Now the home is a lot of times the big challenge, and I believe it certainly was with me. I've been around my family for a long time, and they knew how to push my buttons, and I had a lot of history, and there was a lot of inventory I was going to need to write, for some of the stuff that had gone on in that family. It was going to, and it kind of took me a while to calm down. And I've got to tell you, it took my brother and my sister a long time before they stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? Like I'm 20 years into recovery and my mother dies and they're worried I'm going to try to rob them out of a piece of inheritance. And like I have done nothing in the last 20 years that would let anybody think that would be something that I would do. So sometimes these things take a long time to heal. I'm not in charge of how long it takes to heal. Some of our children take a long time to get back close to us, and it's not our business. Our business is to continue to practice these principles and continue to be the type of family member we really think we need to be, and be a demonstration of positive, constructive relationships. And sometimes it takes a long time. It took a long time to blow them all up. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. Really difficult to do. Really difficult to do. Listen to one of the coolest amends I ever heard of, Chuck C. from California. He was, one of the legendary speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous. He did a workshop once that ended up being put in a book, A New Pair of Glasses, and he talks about the amends that he made to his family. Now, this is like 1945 is when he did this. It's a long time ago. Literally, it was like 1945 when he made amends to his family. And this is what he did. He went to him and he goes, I am going to promise you one thing right here and right now. I am going to promise you one thing right here and right now. I will never, ever ask you to do anything from this moment forward. I will have no expectations. I will not ask you to do anything except for one thing. If I can ever be helpful to you, I want you to ask me. And then he lived and let lived. Like when I first heard that, I can't imagine, like, don't they need my guidance? Can I, offer corrective and constructive criticism if it's going to be beneficial? Not according to Chuck. What I mean? Anyway, argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected. So if positive relationship results are to be expected, then what are we not supposed to do? Fault finding. We're not supposed to do that. Argument. We're not supposed to do that. A lot of times, folks, this is how we move through the world. Argument and fault finding. So understand that no one among us maintains anything like perfect adherence to these principles, and a lot of times it's slow progress. But this is giving us the baseline where we're supposed to end up. We're supposed to end up not arguing and not fault finding with our family. If it's persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. So another thing to put this chapter into context is the families were invited into this process from 1935 to 1939. That's the experience he had prior to writing this book, especially in Akron. You would show up in one of Dr. Bob's meetings and he would say, "Are you married?" And you'd say, "Yes." "Go get your wife. She belongs here too." So the family was brought into this in a big way. We've got Al-Anon now. We've got a lot of other, things have changed a little bit. But there were families who started to live along these spiritual lines because the alcoholic in the family showed such a remarkable change in their ability to deal with life and get along. It became attractive, this way of life, to other family members, and that can still be the case. After they have seen tangible results, the family will perhaps want to go along. These things will come to pass naturally and in good time, provided, however, the alcoholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober, considerate, and helpful, regardless of what anyone says or does. Regardless of what anyone in your family says or does, what are you supposed to be? You're supposed to be sober, considerate, and helpful. Listen, it can be a tall order, and again, progress, not perfection. But but really amazing things happen when these principles are applied. I believe spiritual principles, when applied, do something in the universe to change the universe to the to a better way of experiencing it. And I believe my character defects, when they're expressed, they create all kinds of problems, and the whole continuum of my life is affected, when these character defects are in play. I believe, that spirituality is something that we gain by practicing spiritual principles. So of course, we all fall much below this standard many times, but we must try to repair the damage immediately, lest we pay the penalty by a spree. Here's a place that says, if we don't, get the practice of making amends quickly, the 10-step process of making immediate amends, if we don't get that down pat, we might pay for it with a spree. There's a great line in the 12 and 12. It says, our drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted upon us by people in authority. They result from our personal disobedience to spiritual principles. Now, don't you feel that that's true? Like, if you've relapsed or you see people relapse, I believe the cause of that relapse is disobedience to spiritual principles, disobedience to the processes that are laid out in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just believe, I see too many people, going out when they're bending, the spiritual process. So if there be divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. The wife should fully understand his new way of life. If their old relationship is to be resumed, it must be on a better basis, since the former did not work. This means a new attitude and spirit all around. Sometimes it is to the best interest of all concerned that a couple remain apart. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. When the time for living together has come, it will be apparent to both parties. I've seen incredible reconciliation. I really have. I sponsor a couple of people who found out they had other families that they didn't know about, and they got connected with those families. A couple of guys that I work with were adopted, and went and found their birth parents. And I mean, there's a remarkable ability to connect and be part of this fabric of life that becomes available when we're recovered. Like prior to recovery, my world was really small, and it had to be protected because I had a lot of anxiety. I felt uncomfortable with a lot of things. So I feel uncomfortable with a lot of things. I have a lot of anxiety about a lot of things. So I'm, going to be over here, out of the way. And my world was really small. We gain access to spiritual power, and amazing things can happen. And sometimes we're in relationships that we shouldn't be in, and we realize that. We got involved, in a crazy manner, or sometimes there are people that we truly love, that we messed up stuff so bad that it's going to take a long time to heal, but it does heal. And we end up reconciling and back with them. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. That's for sure. My family was 8 years gone. Okay, when I got sober, my family picked up and left. My wife grabbed the kid, the car, the bank account, the dog, and was gone. and she was remarried with 3 kids by the time I got sober, so there was nothing that was going to go on there. But in my recovery, I realized the fact that it was the best thing in the world that she left. She made it so herself and my daughter were safe. It wasn't safe with me anymore the way I was drinking. And today I'm grateful that happened, and we're definitely two different people today. Oh my God. So in some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Yeah. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. Remember, I said I like to say that the 12 steps are a personal inner pathway to connection with the divine, right? To be in relationship with the divine. And there's wonderful language in this book. The consciousness of the presence of God. There's 100 different ways from Sunday they talk about this experience, and understand that it is an experience. It's very difficult to try to understand this language and these words on this page intellectually, because they're meant to be experienced. This relationship with God is meant to be experienced. It's not a theology where you study it and then understand the mechanics of the religion or something. This is an experiential process whereby without exaggeration, the power of God enters us and works in us and through us and does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And each of us has this experience if we go through the steps, and it becomes our expression of spirituality, and a very, very important thing in our life, because it's brought us freedom and power and comfort and all the things that you get from recovery. We've seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We've seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. What a promise that is. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. What a great paragraph that is. So you and the person you're trying to help are going to walk hand in hand through this spiritual process. And if you persist in continuing to try to do that with people, what's going to happen is you're going to get stuff in your life that you wouldn't have even, that's better than anything you would have even planned. Because things change. Like I would have thought, a Ferrari and a big house on the water, that's probably what I would have wanted when I first got sober, right? But those things don't make us happy. Happiness is an inside job. Happiness, and believe me, I sponsor friggin', a lot of millionaires. And I can tell you right now, it makes life maybe a little easier to have money, but it's not a source of the kind of happiness that's available through the spiritual process. So you will live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances are. So, because it's not out there. It's not out there. The new and wonderful world is in here. It's an inside job. So when working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. You may spoil your chance of being helpful if you do, but urge upon a man's family that he's been a very sick person and should be treated accordingly. You should warn against arousing resentment or jealousy. You should point out that his defects of character are not going to disappear overnight. Show them that he has entered upon a period of growth. Ask them to remember when they are impatient the blessed fact of his sobriety. All good advice for the family. Not that they'll listen to it, but it's all good advice for the family. Listen, we are sick. We're getting better. the stigma of alcoholism is just awful. We have an illness, okay? The American Medical Association has said it's a disease. Alcoholism is a disease. And yet the stigma just pervades the alcoholic. And if we can try to convince a family to see that, look, the person is ill, they're getting better over the course of time. They're getting better. As the weeks go by, things are just going to keep getting better as long as they stay sober and continue to stay on this path. And if we can convince them, maybe things will work out better, not only for them, but for the family. If you've been successful in solving your own domestic problems, tell the newcomer's family how that was accomplished. In this way, you can set them on the right track without becoming critical of them. This is an example of we share our personal experience. We really try to not to point fingers and tell somebody, what they need, what they need to do and stuff. It's better if we can share our own experience. The story of how you and your wife settled your differences is worth any amount of criticism. Assume this was an unusual part of the book Alcoholics Anonymous when I first got sober and I first read it, right? I'm like, why did they put that in there? Well, I'm going to read it. It says, assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go into their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Our experience shows this is not necessarily so. Now, why I felt this was really a bad paragraph when I first got sober is because the meetings were filled with people who didn't go through the steps. We were hanging on to sobriety by massive amounts of meeting attendance and service commitments. That's what we were doing. If you go through these 12 steps, you are going to be placed in a position where you are safe and protected from alcohol. The obsession to drink is going to be removed, without any fight or without any effort on your part. Look at the 10-step promises. The 10-step promises explain that to us. And so I would highlight this particular paragraph by saying, if you've not had an experience with the 12 steps, don't expect this to be your experience. I wouldn't be going, to the beer bong party if you don't have some steps behind you. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. So if you can't go to a bar without feeling uncomfortable, there's step work you got to do. All right. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Okay. But if you're uncomfortable where there's bottles or there's drinking, now I'm not talking about places where people are so drunk they can't even walk. I'm talking about social situations where people are having wine or beer or cocktails, normal people drinking, right? If you're uncomfortable out there and normal people drinking, you got step work to do. So his only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap. And even there, an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Ask any woman who has sent her husband to distant places on the theory that he would escape the alcohol problem. All right, we don't relapse because of access to alcohol. Because there's within 2 blocks of your house, there's a liquor store or a bar, okay? We don't relapse because of access to alcohol. We relapse because of personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So in our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We've tried these methods, these attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. Right. I mean, I'm not going to go to a beer chugging contest party. But if there's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or a work event or a neighborhood party or something, I'm going to go. That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, even plain ordinary whoopee parties. To a person who has had experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, but it isn't. You will note that we made an important qualification. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Or am I expecting to steal a little of vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such a place? If you answer these questions satisfactorily, you need have no apprehension. Go or stay away, whichever seems best. But be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start, and that your motive in going is thoroughly good. So solid spiritual ground is having gone through the steps. That's solid spiritual ground. Think of what you can bring to it. But if you are shaky, you would better work with another alcoholic instead. Why sit with a long face in places where there is drinking, sighing about the good old days? If it is a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. If it's a business occasion, go and attend to your business enthusiastically. If you are with a person who wants to eat in a bar, by all means, go along. Let your friends know that they are not to change their habits on your account. At the proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. So, what I used to say to people is like, hey, Chris, you want to drink? No, thanks. I threatened my entire family with a handgun the last time I drank. I used to be like a smartass. Now I just it doesn't agree with me. I don't drink it. It doesn't agree with me. I have a bad reaction. Yeah, and if somebody keeps pushing you can tell them off if you want. But you'll find that very few people care whether you drink or not. The alcoholic is the person who thinks everybody's going to be wondering why I'm not having 16 bourbons. No, everybody's happy that you're not having 16 bourbons. So while you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. Now you are getting back into the social life of the world. And that is so true. And that is such a wonderful thing. Remember I said my world got smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, every year my world gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm back out in the social fabric of the world. And, I think that's where we're supposed to be. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor. Your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. I've gone into crack dens, pulling people out. I've gone into some really, really bad places. And my motives were someone there was asking for help. So, I had absolutely no worry that all of a sudden I'm going to grab a crack pipe or, start drinking. I'm there on a 12-step call, right? So many of us keep liquor in our homes. We often need it to carry green recruits through severe hangovers. I have on many occasions bought airline bottles to get a green recruit, through the mild forms of DTs. Sometimes it's just not possible to get somebody into a detox or an emergency room. So I've done that. We don't keep any alcohol in the house. So we've got a party next weekend that we're inviting some people to, and we've got right on the invitation. If you want alcoholic beverages, please bring your own. We don't supply them. But we have no issue with you drinking them here. You know what I mean? So some of us still serve it to our friends, provided they are not alcoholic. But some of us think we should not serve liquor to anyone. We never argue about this question. We feel that each family, in light of their own circumstances, ought to decide for themselves. We are careful never to show intolerance or hatred for drinking as an institution. Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. Every new alcoholic looks for this spirit among us and is immensely relieved when he finds we are not witch burners. A spirit of intolerance might repel alcoholics whose lives could have been saved had it not been for such stupidity. Here's the second place in this chapter where it says, if we do something stupid, they get drunk and they might die. Okay, so one of the lip flapping things I used to hear all the time was, if they're ready, there's nothing you can do wrong. If they're not ready, there's nothing you can do right, and that's just not true. We can make mistakes that cost them their sobriety. So we would not even do the cause of temperate drinking any good, for not one drinker in 1,000 likes to be told anything about alcohol by one who hates it. Someday, we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public to a better realization of the gravity of the alcoholic problem, but we shall be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. Drinkers will not stand for it. Bill is already thinking that he's going to help, the scientific world of alcoholism, which he really did try to do in his later years. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol. Besides, we've stopped fighting anything or anybody. We have to. So I'm going to stop with this. Somebody really called me up on the carpet. I was at this meeting and I was talking some crap about somebody or a meeting or something, right? And he looks at me in the eye. He goes, Chris, if you're still fighting anything or anybody, you haven't recovered. And I was just telling him about how I was fighting. And sometimes our ego doesn't like to be pulled up short like that, but he was right. He was right. I've got to stop fighting anything or anybody. Doesn't mean I can't disagree with you, in a courteous manner, but fight with you, no, I really should not do that. So anyway, how long? I've gone on 42 minutes. There's a bunch of people on here I want to hear from. So please just raise your hand and Steve, do you call on them? Do I call on them? What do we do here?
Hold on.